In the world of commercial, photo, and video, there's lots of things that can happen to cause you a great deal of stress and make your biggest nightmares come true. Last month, we talked about the importance of having a contract and how that could protect you in certain situations, and the downside to not having one. Today, we're going to be talking about something else that could cause a nightmare experience for you in the photo-video world, and it's something a lot smaller than just a piece of paper. Today we're going to be talking about the problems that can come from these SD cards. Although it's a great technological advancement, there are still times when these things could be the life or death of your photography. So one day last week I was scrolling through TikTok and I happened to stumble across this photographer right here. And he had this nightmare of a story to share with everybody, and he really explained things in great detail. Essentially, he had went out and shot this client's wedding, and when he got home to look at the photos, his memory card had become corrupt, and all the images were coming up in this kind of pixelated look that you see here on the screen. And he said hardly any at all were salvageable, and he'd already worked through many different methods with different companies and software experts to try and get the images back to normal. But he said some of the images that were fixed and kind of came back to a normal state were so tiny in these thumbnail forms that they were even worse than the original images that just looked like this pixelated mess. Now, I will say, when I first saw the pixelated images, I thought they were pretty cool and artistic in some ways, even though it was a total accident. But at the end of the day, that's not what his clients were looking for. Stressing out with really no other avenues, he contacts the client to explain what's going on and offers them a plethora of options to make up for his mistake. To do a complete reshoot, to continue trying to get these images. He was very apologetic, and you could definitely tell that he felt bad for not only himself, but for his client as well. So he was doing a remarkable job of trying to make things up to the client in every way possible. But fortunately for him, he did find that when he put the memory card back into his camera, the images were coming up just fine. They weren't looking pixelated. So in those live preview screens on the back of his camera, he found a way to transfer the images from the camera to the computer without necessarily using just the memory card. So essentially the camera was reading the files correctly, and then he was taking those correct files and transferring over. Now, he was, I believe, losing the raw quality and only getting JPEGs at this point, but he was, in fact, at least getting the images transferred over. Now, there's a lot of different things that he could have done to help ensure this didn't happen. The first of which being, if you're going to shoot wedding photography or things like this, it's always best to have a camera that has 2 SD card slots. So that way you can put in your primary SD card for everything to be written to, but you also have a backup getting equal copies of everything in there as well. So in the event that one memory card messes up or goes corrupt, you hopefully will have a second memory card which is working fine and will have all those images on there. Now, in the event that both memory cards go corrupt, that could be a pretty big issue. And if a software professional can't get the images worked out for you or fix the memory card, then that's just something that could happen. That's one of the things about this industry with technology. I mean, even with film back in the day, maybe when the film was created, there was something wrong with the chemicals and no image actually took. So there are issues that happen that are beyond our control, but again, that's the importance of having a contract and having things established up front, and at least having some kind of policy in place where you can protect your client, where if something like this happens, you'll offer something for them in return. There's a lot of photo and video professionals, depending on the type of work they're creating, they'll even go as far as to not have just 2 memory cards in their camera, but they'll also do a whole plethora of things after the fact to ensure they always have their files. They separate the hard drive. So copy A and copy B, and maybe even a third copy, will go in 3 different vehicles to different locations to ensure if something happens to one of them, maybe it won't happen to the rest. And to take things a little bit farther, even if you do use just 1 or even 2 as a backup SD cards, when you get home, the important thing, I believe, is you always back up to multiple sources. So I never wipe out my memory card until I get all the images loaded onto a hard drive, my cloud service, or at least one other spot. So I always unload my images to 2 places. And typically what I do, I have 2 actual hard drives here that I'll put my files on each of those. So that way, if something happens to one hard drive, I at least still have a backup of the images on a second hard drive, and they always stay on this SD card until I can ensure that every file on both of these external hard drives are going to be fine. There's no file problems or anything like that. At that moment, then I'll delete and reformat both of my SD cards. So this was a nightmare situation that I'm sure some of us have maybe found ourselves in before, or maybe it's something you never really thought about. It's kind of like when we're teenagers and we're driving really fast down a road or doing something a little bit dangerous, we always think to ourselves, this could never happen to us. But this is something that could always happen to any of us at any time. So always be sure, no matter how big or small the assignment is that you're working on, that you always have some type of backup measure in place. But kudos to the photographer for doing such a great job at taking care of his client and really caring about this situation and finding a way that actually worked. So great job to you. Hope it never happens again. Hope you learned a very valuable lesson. And anybody listening, leave me a comment in the comment section below if anything like this has ever happened to you and your worst nightmare stories down below. But hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, be sure to create something new today.